Okay, welcome everybody to another Sunday of When Black Women Gather. We are gathered here today with Jacqueline Hubbard, who is going to talk to us about freedom schools then and freedom schools now. I think many of us know the concept of the freedom schools, and we're going to learn more about it today, that they are still in existence and what we can do to have a freedom school in our community. So let me highlight Ms. Hubbard. All right, there she is. Thank you so much, Ms. Hubbard, for giving us of your time today. Jacqueline Williams-Hubbard, she's an attorney, so I want her to tell us about what she's been doing, how she ended up from law to education, or is it all related? And she'll talk to us about the freedom schools. And I always say this wrong, even though she corrected me earlier today. She's going to talk to us about ASALAH. Did I say it right?
ASALAH.
ASALAH.
Yes. ASALAH
which is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. So she's going to talk to us about that, because that's a very rich history as well. And, so we're just going to have a conversation here. So welcome, Ms.
Thank you.
Yes.
In 1964, during the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee's Freedom Summer in Mississippi, freedom schools began to supplement the sharecroppers' education received by Blacks and poor whites. And Freedom Summer, I would think that there's hardly anyone who's not familiar with Freedom Summer. I mean, you may be young or whatever, but you should know about Freedom Summer. Let's see if I can get this thing better. Okay. In Florida, our education of our children has been under siege. We have had legislation passed which basically forbids the teaching of African American history if the subject matter would cause the discomfort of other children, white children in particular. And many of our educators have left the system, and our children were being neglected. They were not learning about their own history. This was an abomination to me and to our ASALAH branch here in St. Petersburg. So African Americans, especially, it used to be just Florida, but it's not. It's in many states at this point. We are under assault. There is a genuine concern that our children cannot be taught their history today in Florida. There has been expressed concern that if the truth of American history is told, it might make certain children feel uncomfortable because of the guilt of their ancestors. But then I ask the question, what about Black children? Is there a prohibition on teaching the truth about the Black experience in America? How will children understand the world they live in? What about the comfort of Black children? Is it fair for them to only learn a skewed version of history that erases their ancestors' journey? Why can't children learn about Black Americans' ability to overcome mistreatment, enslavement, brutality, Black codes, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, and discrimination of every kind, and yet, in many instances, we thrive? Those among us who study and know American history will have to teach our children. In 1964, during SNCC's Freedom Summer in Mississippi, Freedom schools began as a supplement, as I said before, to the sharecroppers' education received by Blacks and poor whites. During a 6-week summer program, participants learned reading, writing, math, history, and civics. Nearly 40 freedom schools serve close to 2,500 children, parents, and grandparents. With our recent attacks on Black history in Florida, with other states soon to follow, these freedom schools are as necessary in 2023 as they were 60 years ago. Black history is American history, with all of its hypocrisy, lofty ideals, cruelty, enslavement, and mass incarceration. It is also about an African heritage that led to religious practices that gave hope and salvation. Art, music, and a uniquely American culture envied the world over. By omitting Black history, children are not taught about the courage of the Black soldiers who fought in every American war, including the Civil War, from the War of Independence to recent conflicts. Burying the amazing inventions, advances in medicine, science, politics, and art made by African Americans serve only to keep us in mental slavery. Harvard-trained Dr. Carter G. Woodson, known as the father of Black history, founded the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALAH, in 1915 to study and appreciate Black history. He also established Negro History Week in 1926 that later became Black History Month in 1976. Black History Month exists to celebrate the accomplishments of Black people throughout the history of this nation. However, the white supremacist ideology that plagues American society works hard to continue the legacy of racial terror, enslavement, mass incarceration, intimidation, and segregation. This is partly due to the apathy of many American citizens who continue to ignore the past and the present. America must wake up to our present-day political horror and accept that our past is responsible for this condition. Instead of burying this history, it needs to be taught. Dr. Henry Louis Gates, who is the director of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard, recently wrote in the New York Times that Dr. Woodson was acutely aware of politics' role in the classroom. Gates quoted Wilson on the pseudo-scholarship of the lost cause. I don't think I need to talk about that. Everybody knows what the lost cause is. That was those people who lost the Civil War trying to come up with some other reason than slavery for the war. And this is what Dr. Carter Woodson wrote. Starting out after the Civil War, the opponents of freedom and social justice decided to work out a program which would enslave the Negro's mind inasmuch as the freedom of the body had to be conceded because they lost the Civil War and slavery ended. It was well understood that if by the teaching of history, the white man could be further assured of his superiority, and the Negro could be made to feel that he had always been a failure, and that the subjugation of his will to some other race is necessary, the freedman then would still be a slave. Perhaps the time has finally gotten here where each of us as Americans need to acknowledge that American history has been a brutal and racist history. The truth is the treatment of Black Americans resulted in organized racial terror before and after the end of Reconstruction. How do we know? The NAACP, the Equal Justice Initiative from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Tuskegee University have documented each nearly 4,400 racial terror lynchings against Black Americans, primarily in the southern United States, but also in the Midwest, from the end of Reconstruction in 1877 until 1950. There are many more still not yet fully documented. I'm proud to say that both Donna and I worked with a group of people from our church for 4 years to establish a lynching memorial for several people, but the named person, John Evans, we were able to locate the spot where he was lynched and shot maybe 1,500 times and left to die hanging from a light pole in Pinellas County. And we also honored Parker Watson, and we erected this lynching memorial marker at the location where John Evans was lynched in St. Petersburg. Now, the Freedom School that we opened in St. Petersburg was opened with the purpose of teaching our youth and their parents an inclusive American history. The St. Petersburg branch acknowledges the community support it has received for our Freedom School. Now, what we did was first we had to find a location for our Freedom School. And fortunately, the ASALAH branch here in St. Petersburg, one of our members is a wonderful person by the name of Mrs. Terry Lipsey Scott. And Terry Lipsey Scott is the executive director of the Dr. Carter G. Woodson African American Museum of History that has been renamed the Woodson Museum of History, the Woodson Museum of Florida. And it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be, I don't know how many times larger than it is already. And the site for it is just about completed. In any event, she invited our group to hold the Freedom School at the Dr. Carter G. Woodson Museum, which was an absolutely perfect place for us. When I say us, I'm talking about the ASALAH branch of St. Petersburg. And so we decided to break up into several committees, because in order to have a school, you need a curriculum and you need a syllabus. And we needed to determine what, given the massive incidents that need to be touched on in African American history, just how we were going to do it. And so we developed a curriculum and a syllabus. And I'm not sure those documents are on the website where you have it, but I can tell you that we had 10 classes in 10 weeks. We fed the children breakfast before every class. Everyone who taught was highly, how do you put it, qualified. They were either educators or retired educators. And I think almost everybody had an advanced degree. So we came up with the 10 sessions. We came up with the curriculum and the syllabus, which would tell us what each session would be about. And one of the things that I have said over and over again is that ASALAH should follow the teachings of Dr. Carter Woodson. You will remember he wrote the book, Miseducation of the Negro. That was like his signature book. And we have been miseducated. And I often say a couple of quotes that I share with you. Benjamin Franklin accurately stated that an investment in education returns the best interest. Okay? We all probably believe that. Frederick Douglass said, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." And free and equal education for Black children has been a struggle from the very beginning of this country. For a long period of time, remember, literally hundreds of years, fundamental rights, such as the right to vote, the right to read and write, the right to equal education in free public schools, the right to public accommodations in interstate and in-state travel, were denied to Black Americans. Even the right to full citizenship for Black Americans who are allegedly free was also denied. And I want everybody to remember this, because one of our professors, one of our instructors is a professor at Stetson Law School, and she's the first Black woman to receive tenure at Stetson Law School. And she and I co-taught a class together. And we basically talked about the fact that the United States Supreme Court has always been a conservative institution, and it approved all of these things that oppress Black people. And so we needed to tell the kids about these things. So let me give you a timeline of the matters that we wanted to touch upon at our Freedom School. And I can tell you that our kids at that school, their parents too, because sometimes the parents will come and sit in and say, "I want to take this course too." We talked about slavery's Black codes that existed from 1619 to 1865. We talked about the Civil War, Reconstruction, which lasted from 1865 to 1877, which died because of the compromise of President Hayes' election. And the compromise was that if the North would withdraw its troops from the South and leave Black people to their own means, then President Hayes would be elected as the President of the United States. That happened, and that caused the end of Reconstruction. Because one of the things people have to know, and I was surprised at how little some of the people knew. A lot of people did not know about the amazing things that General Grant, who later became President Grant, did. We know he was a great general and war technician, but we didn't know about his presidency after the Civil War, after he was elected. And he was the president that started the Department of Justice. And we hear about the Department of Justice all the time. However, it was Ulysses S. Grant who started the Department of Justice. And the reason he started the Department of Justice was so that the federal government could prosecute the Ku Klux Klan. And they filed over 2,300 lawsuits, and they won all of them. And he practically destroyed the Klan Then, of course, you know, he developed cancer and wasn't reelected. So we had the end of Reconstruction, Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan, the first iteration of it. And then we had a period of brutality and mass lynchings between 1870 and 1950. Now, some positive things also happened. I'm giving you a couple of them, but the Niagara movement and the founding of the NAACP was monumental during 1909, 1911. The post-World War I return of African-American soldiers was a real starting point of the civil rights movement post-Civil War. Because those soldiers went to war, as I said, in every war Black people have fought in. But when they returned home, and they fought in a segregated army, a segregated Air Force, everything was segregated. The Navy was the only armed services division that did not have a segregated, you know, that didn't segregate the Black soldiers from the Black Navy people from the white Navy people. So when they returned to the same old racist country that they had left and been fighting for in World War I. But when they came back to America, the soldiers were so brutally treated by the white population right after World War I that the discontent of these Black soldiers started what we call the Great Migration North, which started in 1915. Then in 1919, we had the Red Summer. So I don't know if you all are aware of what happened during the Red Summer, but in 1919, there were race riots. I think I have a list of them, like 23 race riots all over the United States, all over the South, Midwest, and a lot of people were killed. That was in 1919, the Red Summer. Then we have A. Philip Randolph and the Pullman Porters and the March on Washington. He organized a March on Washington in 1941. And of course, and it was large, and the Pullman Porters, they were right on it. Then we had Martin Luther King, you know, who in my opinion was such a genius. We had the Montgomery bus boycott, and we had the death of Emmett Till. Then we talked about Thurgood Marshall and Walter White. These were two Black attorneys who basically tried Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, which wound up being the catalyst for the most recent iteration of the civil rights struggle. And they won that case based upon an opinion that was given, a minority opinion, because he was always dissenting. Let me go get that book. Can you excuse me for 1 second?
Absolutely. I just put in the chat, said that's a very extensive curriculum, and it makes absolute sense because Black history is American history, and our kids especially have to have the foundation, and it needs to come from us. So I applaud the whole concept of the Freedom School and that it goes. And I love that she said the parents, because I think the parents should be required to participate. Go ahead.
Okay. John Marshall Harlan was called the Great Dissenter. I realize we have mirror images here. And I just want you to know that he dissented in all of those opinions from Plessy v. Ferguson on down that declared that Black people were less than human beings and less than citizens. He dissented. And one of the interesting things about John Marshall Harlan, he consistently kept saying, Black people are people, just like white people are people. Black people should be citizens. Black people should not be treated like this. And he'd always be the lone voice in the Supreme Court saying this. The majority opinion was always, you know how bad it was when we had Plessy versus Ferguson, and we had Dred Scott in the very beginning of the Supreme Court, and we had the Plessy v. Ferguson case, which came out of New Orleans. It was so disappointing, but he dissented in all of those cases that dealt with Black people and citizenship. And he made the argument consistently that it was unconstitutional to deny Black citizens their rights after the Civil War. Then we moved on to Martin Luther King, Andrew Young, Ella Baker, who helped found the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1960. And then the Freedom Rides from 1960 to 1961, they were monumental in changing the overall view that Americans had of what was going on in the South. Because it's really easy. We talked about this earlier when we talked about Palestine. It's very easy if you're not there to disregard the horrors that are going on there. Now, I grew up in the South, and I had a fairly, for Black people, privileged upbringing. And my granddaughter is the 5th generation of college-educated people in my family. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a physician, and he's credited with developing the cure for pellagra. And most of my family is from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And we moved to Florida when I was after I finished the 8th grade, and I was entering the 9th grade. So a lot of things that happened in St. Petersburg, I may not have been aware of, but I was certainly aware of what was going on in the larger United States. And I certainly received lots of Black history from my family. And I'm hoping that will continue as in all Black families. So then we had the Freedom Rides, then we had the lunch counter sit-ins in 1960. And then we had the bombings and the Birmingham killings in 1963 of those 4 little girls. Makes me sad to this day. The March on Washington in 1963, Freedom Summer, we've already discussed. The March in Selma, Alabama, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. James Meredith's admission to the University of Mississippi, which is a tragic tale. And we had the death of Martin Luther King, and shortly there in 1968, and American cities just went up in flames. And Martin Luther King was killed on April 4th, 1968. This is the civil rights struggle timeline that we wanted to touch upon in the 10 weeks of study. Now, fortunately, we had people who were very knowledgeable about Black history. And I consider myself not a historian, but a lawyer, but I do a lot of reading. And then we had to go out and find the children, which we thank the museum for, because the museum also has a weekly calendar, and they publicized the Freedom School. And before we knew it, we had 26 kids who had signed up. We really only wanted 20. We wound up with about 16 or 17 who finished it. So now I'm going to share with you from our website some scenes from our Freedom School. Now, what you're looking at right now is the closing ceremony of the Freedom School, and some of our students. We gave every student a T-shirt with ASALAH Freedom School on it, 2023, and we gave everybody a kente cloth neck thing. And this little young man, Dean, right here to the right, at the closing ceremony, let me just, if you scroll down, you see his, oh, you don't see his video? Let me see. He played this at the very end, so you scroll back up, because it should be there. There it is. Now, if you would just click that on, that finished our Freedom School. If you can hear it. Okay, there we go. I have to step up. Thank you very much.
Yes.
The other scenes you can look at whenever you want to. I can give you the website.
Yeah, I put it in the chats for everybody. Did you want to show this video as well?
The opening ceremony, maybe
we
a
have
little.
we have a few hands coming up
Okay.
there, so we can take questions if you don't, however you want to do it.
Okay, no, they can go on the website and see everything.
Okay. Should I stop sharing now, or you want to show
Yes, I
something else?
would.
Okay, okay.
And if there are any questions, I'll be happy
Would
to
you
answer.
please put the web page in the chat, please? I don't see the website.
Okay. I did. I'll put it there again. I'll
Thank you.
list it again. Yeah, Miss Massey, you have a question?
Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. My question, I've heard about an organization called Faith in Florida, and they have developed a curricula. Are you in collaboration with them? Is your curricula different from theirs?
Yes, we made a decision in ASALAH that we would not have anything to do with Tallahassee.
Okay.
So this was unique to the other Freedom Schools. We did not want to jeopardize any of our teachers being fired, which has happened all over the state. We did not want to have any oversight from the Department of Education in Tallahassee. We wanted an independent, all-volunteer freedom school. And we weren't dependent on anything other than the finances that we raised ourselves and the donations that we received from other people. And we were able to put it all together and have our freedom school. I
That was
can't
one
say
of my
that-
questions about your fundraising, and you were your teachers volunteers, or
Yeah.
how did that, okay.
Everyone was a volunteer.
So is that other curricula, the other organization, they're linked to Department of Ed? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Florida has you should be aware of this. Florida has 2 constitutional provisions that say Florida has to teach African American history, that's one, and it has to teach the Holocaust, about the Holocaust. That's 2. And so they have this group, it's like a committee of people who are on the African American curriculum committee, but the new governor, from what I understand, appointed a whole bunch of new people, and that was kind of in disarray. So we just didn't want to have anything to do with those kinds of controversies, and so we depended on volunteers and donations. So
let me ask you, for your curriculum, is it available for, other people to use?
Yes,
I was
it
trying
is.
to look on the website. I didn't see it very quickly.
Yes, I have copies of it, and we will be happy to share those. I've shared them with lots of other groups. I have a copy right here, and I can tell you what I liked about it. I taught 3 classes.
Did you?
Mm-hmm. I can tell you that our student learning objectives were to identify the major periods in the histories of Black or African Americans from their beginnings in Africa to the end of the 20th century. Number 2, to identify and interpret the important political, economic, cultural, religious, and scientific forces that shaped and were shaped by Black and African Americans in the United States. Number 3, to summarize and explain the continuity and the change in African American histories. And 4, to provide foundational knowledge and information on how to continue to learn about Black history. We started off with week 1 was ancient African kingdoms. What is Africa? You'd be amazed that people don't understand Africa. Some people think of it as one big country, but there's a complex, beautiful history of ancient African kingdoms, and that's how we started out. The next week, we talked about the Middle Passage, Africans in the Atlantic world. And in week 3, we talked about enslavement and resistance, 1619 to 1860. And there was a discussion about Blacks settling in or fleeing to Canada and Mexico. In week 4, we discussed the Civil War, emancipation, and Reconstruction, the compromise I mentioned earlier, and the generals Sherman and Grant. In week 5, segregation and resistance, 1880 to 1932, which included a discussion of the Great Migration that started in 1915, when many thousands of Black people left the South and moved north and west. In week 6, we discussed the origins of the Civil Rights Movement from 1933 through 1957 and the importance of the separate but equal doctrine. Week 7, we talked about the civil rights and Black power movements for freedom, equality, and justice, spanning 1955 to about 1980. In week 8, We talked about African Americans in arts and culture, the Harlem Renaissance, spirituals, and dance. Week 9, we talked about African Americans, inventions, business, science, technology, and health. And in week 10, we had the closing ceremony. And since then, we are still meeting, trying to do, that's the syllabus, by the way. That was the syllabus. And I'll email a copy up to you.
Please, and I will definitely share it out. Donna, you had a question, and also I want to thank you, Donna, for introducing Ms. Hubbard and bringing her to us for this wonderful, wonderful conversation. So thank you both. Donna also is in St. Petersburg. So go ahead,
You're
Ms.
welcome.
G.
My question to Jacqueline, what resource did the ASALAH use to develop the curriculum? That's all.
We used a lot of things. We had one book that was published by National ASALAH called Black History 365. It's a very thick book and it was very expensive, but we were able to get enough copies. That was our biggest expense. And we were able to get enough copies for each instructor. And we were happy about that. And so the instructors would then take the subject matter that they had agreed to teach and develop their own way of teaching that subject matter. And it worked very well.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Thank you, Ms. Donna. Deirdre?
Thank you. Attorney Hubbard, I believe ASALAH had their national conference in Jacksonville over
Yes.
the last couple of months.
No, last couple of weeks.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's been
about 3
recent. It's been recent, and I wasn't able to attend, but I'm wondering, was the subject of freedom schools discussed at
Oh,
this
yes,
year's
we had a
conference?
panel.
And what is the position on freedom schools, and is there already an established national curriculum?
There is not an established national curriculum. ASALAH National has taken the position of supporting both the idea and the existence of freedom schools throughout the country. The Florida Coalition, because we have at least, 6 or 7 branches, more branches, I think, than any other state. We decided at one of our president's meetings that we would start a freedom school. We shared that with National ASALAH. They thought it was great. And the first one to open was in Sarasota, Manatee County. And the second one to open was ours. Manatee County, and there are 3 or 4 freedom schools in process as we speak.
So I'm in West Palm Beach. Is there one in Palm Beach County? I'm not aware.
I think I'm not sure if you have an ASALAH branch there or not. I know you have one in Jacksonville.
Do we have a freedom school? I'm thinking.
Oh,
that
no,
we-
you don't. You don't have a freedom school. So far, only 2. The St. Petersburg branch and the Sarasota branch, Manatee County, are the only ones who've had the freedom school from beginning to completion.
Okay,
And Manatee County is getting ready to start a second session in Sarasota where they hope to enroll 100 students.
so have the freedom school,
They're very different from us.
okay,
And we have to discuss this among ourselves.
okay,
They were able to convince some public school teachers who were working for the state to come and teach at the Freedom School. And they were paid $200, I think, a class. And but you have to understand that the Sarasota Manatee branch of ASALAH has over 300 members. We have about 47, because we just got two new members just a couple of days ago.
So what's required to be a member? Do you have to be an educator or?
No,
Okay,
you just have to want to support the things that Dr. Woodson stood for, which was mainly education.
Right.
And telling the truth about our history and our culture, because it's so rich, it really is. And you pay your fee, membership fee, to the local branch, and you pay a similar fee to the national, and then you become a member of ASALAH.
I'm gonna look into that because we need something down here particularly. And we're gonna get right back to questions, but real quickly, so being in Florida, knowing what this person and the governor is doing, have you all come under attack at all?
No, we have gotten so many compliments about doing this.
Mhm.
And the parents and the kids, they just apparently loved it, because if you look at the website, there is one television interview at the end of the Freedom School where the kids talk about the Freedom School. It's all very positive.
Yeah, let me go to questions. Adrian Streeter is do you have a question?
Yeah, yeah, I'm a retired educator. Last week I substituted and I just felt overwhelmed by the multitude of problems that are going on, just mental health issues.
Right.
And I would love to get your curriculum so that I can speak with one of the principals, who is a sorority sister of mine. She's a Delta,
I
and
am
see.
too.
Oh, hi, Sor. How you doing, Sor? So here in Detroit Public Schools, I just feel that, I got emotional over the week and had to call from parents trying to bring the kids in and sit them in different chairs and trying to take over, and from behavioral issues, from some of, even at the kindergarten level, this particular class, not being able to have the academic where they need to be.
Right.
So it was a week. I helped a teacher out, then went to a training, and I just felt a sense of overwhelmed. And to implement this, or would as an after school, they have after school, I think Monday through Thursday, and I would be willing to volunteer.
That
And
would be
if
great, because it could be a club.
yeah, and integrate this in there, and also give them, I'm gonna try to get them started saving, since I'm a financial coach, and get them at kindergarten saving and instilling the information into the parents as well.
Well,
So
good luck, because I can tell
this,
you, I have 3 grandchildren, and the 11-year-old, he doesn't even care about money at all. It's
right,
just amazing to me. And
yeah.
I send him like $20 on a regular basis, and he puts it somewhere. And I said, "What did you spend your $20 for anything?" "No." "Are you saving it?" "I guess so." So,
So,
and he's 6th grade. He's not
wow,
kindergarten. And his
right,
brothers and sisters are totally different.
Yeah, I love that the parents are involved. I have a vision that, having an after school or Saturday school, where parents are, like we'll have your kids and we'll teach them, Black history or whatever the case may be, or just an after school tutoring program, but it is required that in exchange for us babysitting your kid, that you come once a month, you come and engage in education with your child. I just think that's so powerful.
That's a great idea.
How is what is the parent participation like? Oop, I didn't mean to do that, sorry.
Patient is,
Okay, I
I
was
mean,
trying
here,
to, okay,
if
I don't know
you-
what I was doing. But how is the parent responsiveness?
pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
there's at least one parent who volunteered and came every single day.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Because I think it gets the kids involved once the parents are involved. Kilpia, you have a question, please?
I do. Thank you so much, Mrs. Hubbard. This was wonderful.
Good one.
My question I had went on your website a little while ago, I believe it was your website, and I saw that there was an opportunity that was, well, we were behind schedule for, but you all had a grant program. Was that from your chapter or was that from the national?
I think that's from the national.
Okay, all right, so,
Our website is very similar. Their website is ASALAH.org. Our website is ASALAH St. Petersburg.org, and everything's spelled out. So a lot of times if you get Google, you're going to be misled to a million different things. I haven't figured out how to get rid of Google. I'd like to.
Good luck. That's not happening.
it was an opportunity to apply, and I was wondering if that could be used to actually take your curriculum and implement it somewhere else. Or
Yes, we've sent the curriculum out to lots of people who wanted a copy and who wanted to start a freedom school.
Sylvia, you're in Jersey. Are you aware of an ASALAH branch there?
no, I'm not really familiar. I've certainly heard the name and I thought that there might be some here, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Jocelyn's not on the call. She had another commitment this afternoon, but I'm almost pretty sure that she's told me that there is a branch in New Jersey. So
I think I don't have the list, but I think
Yeah.
there.
yeah. All right, thank you, Ms. Kay.
Yeah.
Lyndon, you had a question?
I had a question and a comment. First, I think it's great that you got this kind of curriculum happening, because God knows we could have used this like yesterday, given this environment, because quite frankly, there's some people who are confronted with this with their children, and by extension, grandchildren. Why are you coming up here with all this black stuff? And this is going on in 2023, not 1965. This is 2023, and this is happening. So with all this stuff that's happening with what's his face down there in Florida, in a you're kind of forced, I think, to address this stuff. This is my question. It's a twofold question, Mrs. Hubbard, right?
Yeah, Attorney Hubbard.
Okay.
I used
All
to
right.
be a Mrs. Hubbard.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
No apologize. No
Okay.
apology needed. It's just a fact.
Okay. This is my thing. Number one, is there enough emphasis on ethnicity? I mean, it's one thing to, to talk about the history and stuff, which is important, but we're in a space where people have, and I'll just be blunt here, they've dropped the ball as it relates to taking pride in their ethnicity.
Yes.
You know, the whole thing. You notice I said ethnicity, not necessarily racial identity, because there's a distinction. And and sadly, you got some people who are old enough who ought to know better. Frankly, they don't seem to understand the distinction between the two. But I stress this because when we talk about the things that we've created within the confines of the United States, that is what a friend of mine calls Afro-Americana culture. And then my second thing, and then I'll shut up here. I was glad to see, I don't know who the other sister was who said that she's a Delta. And then you just a moment ago acknowledged that you're a Delta. That's part of the Afro-Americana experience.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're now in a space where people have been shamed and guilted as it relates to affiliation. So my question, and my ultimate question is, how much emphasis is on the role that Black folks have played within, the United States in terms of the institutions that we have built? And of course, when you start talking about the Divine Nine, that represents one of our institutions. So I'll land my plane
That
there.
was one area that we did not get into very much. But we did acknowledge the existence of the Black fraternities and sororities and their contributions and the age and whatever. And we certainly talked about HCBUs.
Yeah, clearly those are definitely key parts of our history. And I think what I hear Lyndon saying is that we have shied away from celebrating who we are as Black people. And I'm sure, and that's why I loved your curriculum, because the common thread through it all was to know who we are, who are our heroes. We don't need other people to tell us who our heroes are, but you know, we need to know. And many of us didn't learn this stuff in school. We learned it on our own. Some of us are still learning it. I heard, I put it in the chats here. I'm sure you probably heard of it before, where the MAFA, the Middle Passage, is referred to as MAAFA. Have you heard that before?
No.
Yes, I think it's called the Ma'afa.
MAAFA, the
Mhm.
Black Holocaust. Yeah, I'm reading, I'm taking, do a shameless plug. I'm taking Joy LaGrue's class on post-traumatic slave syndrome, and she covers so much, but I just read that this morning. I had never, so you call it Ma'afa? Is that how you say it? Thank you, Lyndon.
And Marimba Ani
Heard that
spoke a
term.
lot about it.
Yeah, so it's Mahafa, and they said so instead of calling it the Middle Passage, I guess people are calling it the Black Holocaust. And even the numbers that she said that, you know, as many as 10 to 15 million people died before they ever got here, more than
Right.
ever in the you know, the Jewish Holocaust. Somebody needs a mute. I'm not sure who that is. But somebody needs to mute, please. So anyway, I can't see who it is. But anyway, go ahead, Ms. Bay, you have a question? Let me see if I can figure out who.
No, Ms. Helen, I didn't have a question. I just had a statement. I'm really enjoying the conversation. Good afternoon, family. Well, first of all, I wanted to mention that my ex-mother-in-law, Lena Francis McGriff, was one of the little girls. She was supposed to go to, she was from Alabama, and she was supposed to go to church that particular day that the four girls got bombed. She just passed, made transition about 3 years ago at the age of 100. But I just wanted to mention that. And then her grandson, not grandson, her nephew was Herman Rice, who was very significant here in Philadelphia and forming the Young Great Society. And I think he made a move to run for president at one point. But anyway, I wanted to share that. But I also wanted to say that what this whole subject brought to mind to me was no taxation without representation. We really need to be doing a major tax revolt. But then again, I question that because I say, it seems like the path that you're going, being independent, is doing so well. And when we start fighting for inclusion, it might not be such a good idea. You know, this path of just going about the business, getting the tasks done, and forming these independent satellite schools may be our best road. But I still feel like, why should we be taxed if we're not going to be represented in the whole scheme of things, educational wise, economic wise, whatever. So I just wanted to share that point.
So what I found interesting in the original Freedom Schools, first of all, I put in the chats, were people surprised that white folks were involved in the bridge? Because you don't think, I just think of Black. I didn't think of poor whites also. So was there a large representation historically of white folks who attended these schools? Do you know?
I don't know. I worked for SNCC, but only after I went to college.
Okay. I was going to ask Ms. Sherelle's question, but I see she's there. Sherelle, did you want to ask the question you just put in the chats? Sherelle?
No, I had a different comment, but okay. So just to kind of piggyback off of what the last lady was saying about just supporting well, I guess, okay, let me say this too. I guess what I typed, this does piggyback off of that too. If we don't have these type of freedom schools in our communities already, I was just thinking about how important it is to even build community. And one way is supporting our business owners and really starting to organize our communities to where, like I said, we're supporting those businesses. We're getting these type of schools in our communities so that we are building a support system or like an infrastructure that continues to build throughout the years.
That's got to be about us.
That's all.
We have to take charge for what information is
Mhm.
put in our children's minds. I'm just trying to scan the questions here. So as we wrap up, because I so appreciate your time, Attorney Hubbard. Just wanting to know, is there any nuggets that we can take away in terms of starting our own schools? And what can we do in our own communities? How can we get involved with ASALAH? What are the first steps that we can take?
Well, it's certainly not, ASALAH may be, the group that's sort of like fostering this idea, but I don't think you have to be a member of ASALAH to start a freedom school. I understand that there are churches now in our area who want to start freedom schools, and it's my intention anyway. I just returned to St. Petersburg after being out of town for about 2 weeks, to meet with those clergy and see if they would like to have some freedom schools.
Let me ask you too, so the students would meet, you said it was a 10-week course, they would meet once a week, twice a week, and for how long? 2 hours,
Once
3
a
hours?
week for 10 weeks.
But for how long? 2 hours at a time or 4 hours?
No, for about 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Okay, very good, very good. And at the conclusion, was there a test?
Yes, we had an evaluation, written evaluation of the school, and we handed those to the students to fill out.
Okay.
And those of us who participated, we had a meeting and talked about our experiences. It was very positive. That's all I can tell you. It for me, it just reminded me that we have a beautiful history, African Americans do, in spite of everything we've come up against. And when you start going back and teaching this history, if you feel good about it, which is what I felt so good about learning more and teaching African American history, that I just started reading sort of madly. And there's so much more I wanted to know about. And you will find that the kids really need it. I mean, they didn't know, if I had to list 10 famous African Americans who helped us get through the struggle, I would say that the students, and these were high school students for the most part, and so little Dean, his brother was in high school, and he came with his brother. They didn't know. They couldn't recognize. I had a quiz in which I had photographs of Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses Grant, Sherman, abolitionists, and all manner of people, maybe 10, 12 photographs. And I would ask them if they recognized who that person was, would you write their names down? I did that once, and of course, they knew, everybody knows what Frederick Douglass looks like, but they didn't really know other people.
Well,
And
you learn in school, you learn Frederick Douglass, you learn Harriet Tubman, you learn Martin Luther King. They
Right.
don't, I don't know what else we learned. Who else were the big ones that we learned? But yeah. So that's powerful.
George Washington Carver.
George Washington Carver.
Kids get that. I didn't get that in my school.
I remember my mother said that when she was a child back in the 40s and early 50s, she said that they learned about
Oh, the peanut.
George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, and black
Right.
folk were picking cotton. That was the extent of it.
Yeah.
And where I grew up in North Carolina, I mean, you didn't have to go very far to see people picking cotton.
Right.
I just remember thinking my God, that looks like really hard work.
Yeah, I remember the first
Over
time.
big sacks on their backs.
I grew up in California, and you
fields.
didn't have to go far to see it either. My family picked cotton in California, and I worked in the fields as well.
That must have been Central Cal.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But a lot of people from LA would come if they worked in the factories, the GM and all those places in LA. They would come up to the Central Valley during the weekend and pick cotton and watermelons and go back to LA.
And so Ms. Hubbard and Helen, I've certainly enjoyed this conversation. So I have a question, Ms. Hubbard. For either Kwanzaa or African American History Month, would it be possible that some of the children who have been involved in this project could come and share some of the things that they've learned with this group? One of the things that's important for our community is to affirm the work that our children are involved in. And so if there's a way for some type of presentation to be done by these children, I think it'd be absolutely tremendous for all the people who are part of this effort, as well as for the students themselves.
That is a great suggestion. I'm surprised it hasn't come up in our meetings, but I'm going to certainly suggest that at our annual Black History Month celebration that we have a presentation by our students. That sounds great.
I love it. I love it. So we want them on our, I love that. Thank you, Bill. That was a great suggestion. I'm going to put this in the chats for everybody. This is, so a good place to start learning Black history for those of us who have not had the exposure that we should have is From Slavery to Freedom. It's John.
That's excellent. We use that. I did.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I'm going to put it in the chats for people if you just want to get started on your own. It's a good place to start. It's John Hope Franklin, and he covers everything. So this is a good place to start reading for yourself and talking with your kids.
Yes.
Everybody familiar with this book? And of course, Miseducation of the Negro as well, which I give to graduating. If you're graduating high school, that's my gift. That and a $25 check. That's what you get from me. So.
That's very good.
Attorney Hubbard, if you don't mind, could I, if I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but if you don't mind me making a suggestion?
No, go ahead.
There was a book that set, and I can speak from personal experience. That set my brain and heart on ablaze when I was a young boy in the 70s, called The Eyewitness of the Negro. And that was by a white guy named, oh Lord, what was his name? I'm drawing a blank. Oh, William Loran Katz.
No, I'm not familiar with that book.
He Eyewitness of the Negro. I don't know if it's in print, but that one right there, that covers a whole lot. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was published in '67.
Okay, let me just tell you a couple of things about our Freedom School before we end, and you made me think of it. One of the things that we decided in our committee was we would not allow the use of the N-word. We don't care if it's in a poem, in a documentary, whatever it's in. If it's in a documentary, we might let it through, but we just made a blanket, no N words, okay, doing the Freedom School. The second thing is we wanted to use African American sources to the extent possible. So yes, we did use John Hope Franklin's, at least some of the instructors did. We obviously couldn't do that with Supreme Court cases, but the book, there is a book, and it's called Black History 365. And it's a wonderful book. It's expensive. It's about $200 and something, and it's at least 3 inches thick. What?
Somebody needs a mute, but go ahead. Sorry about that. Keep going.
I'm just saying we tried to use original sources, from Black people who made statements, or books that were written by African Americans. We just wanted to reinforce the African Americanness and the Blackness of our Freedom School.
Another excellent resource is Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett.
Yes, I didn't use that, but that's
that was the book that I was in middle school. I'm 69 years old, but in middle school, I got a hold of that book. I think it was published in the 60s. And,
oh yeah, that was a great book. I remember that book.
That one really sparked my interest. I've relied on that throughout my life. It's a great book to give you not just the story here in this country, but it positions us as people of the world. And it, goes back to some of the African history and the fact that we were a people fully formed with many years of history, great kingdoms before the Mayflower. So, even before there was America.
Right.
There's
One other thing I will share with you before we end, which is that our ASALAH branch has a very extensive library of documentaries. And since we are a 501c3 organization, the Public Broadcasting Network has given us blanket permission to use anything. Their documentaries, their shows, whatever, in our school. And we have used them.
And that in itself is powerful. So we have 2 more hands. We're going to do those questions really quick, and then we're going to give Miss Hubbard back her time. Kilpia, go ahead real quick, please.
Yes, Attorney Hubbard, one other question back to Sherelle's original post. Would you be, or I guess I'm asking for ASALAH, if there were a couple of entities that were interested in implementing your curriculum, would you all be willing to consider doing some kind of a training, maybe even on Zoom, to get people off and kind of going on their own?
Sure, assuming, time is limited, but we're certainly willing to share what information we have. We're trying to figure out what to do now during the school year. Unfortunate, but that's going to come into play. We think everything's going to come together for that. We're working on it now.
Well, there's also that concept, of course, from the Jews of Saturday school.
Yes,
right.
It's just, and we are working on that as we speak.
Great, thank you so much.
Our museum has a lot of things going on Saturdays, but I think we've worked something out.
Great.
I remember being in Baltimore some time ago, and there were all these Asian kids all dressed in uniforms coming from school on Saturday. Our kids were going to football practice. I'm like, okay. So we definitely need to address that. All right. Look, I'm very, very appreciative of your time. I think this was an excellent, excellent idea. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much, Donna, for suggesting that we do this show. And then the thing is that, with all the attacks on Black education across the board, we talked about Freedom School some time ago. So to actually be able to have somebody come in who's actually doing one, and a very successful one, is just, it's beautiful. So thank you so much for your time. And we will circle back.
And we'll be happy to share. And I'll make sure you get a copy of our curriculum and syllabus.
Yeah, I have quite a few requests, like how am I going to get the curriculum? And I'm telling them she's going to email it to me and I'll send it to you all. So yeah, so this is beautiful. So are there any parting words that you have for us before we sign off?
Just think positively and it will happen.
Think positively and put some muscle behind it and it will happen.
Yeah. Just stick with it. It's going to happen because people are looking for it.
Yeah, I think there's a thirst for it at this time, and it's important that, like I said, we need to feed ourselves and not other folks. So before we sign off, can I get everybody to unmute? We can sign off like we do every week. And we can let Attorney Hubbard go. I see some new faces. I don't know. Hi, Charlotte. I can't wait to talk to you. Hi.
How are you?
So what we do here, thank you so much for your time. I think this has been a wonderful, another wonderful session that we've been able to participate in here. I thank you all for coming. There is no When Black Women Gather without you all and our brothers too. Thank you, my brothers, for coming. And When Black Women Gather,
Amazing things happen.
Got my shirt on.
and I see Donna has on her shirt, yeah. And we have had another amazing session, and thank you so much. And Miss Hubbard, please come back again. You're welcome anytime. We'll add you to our email list, and everybody on here who's not been here before, I'll add you to my email list. If it becomes overwhelming, just say, girl, take me off that list. And also, if you're on Facebook, please join us on our Facebook page. This is a place just for Black women. Sorry, brothers, it's just for women. And I'm very strict about making sure it's just us. So anyway, thank you all so much. I'm going to stop the recording. We can hang out for a few more minutes and talk, and then we're going to say good night.